Event has now been recorded. Right, it started. Right, thank you. Good morning, everybody, all you wonderful people out there. This is Patrick O'Leary from FleetWatch magazine. I am managing editor of it. Manage myself in that, or try. And welcome to the Myth of the Brakes Failed webinar. We thought this a very apt webinar, and I hope that you'll see now. So you probably tapped into this webinar because you want to know more about the subject of brakes. It is quite a complex subject, but there is another reason. And that reason is because, like us, you care. You care about road safety and saving lives because that's what functional brakes do. It's about road safety and saving lives. So you do care. And due, of course, to the massive size of commercial trucks, they're a critical safety feature. Brakes are a critical safety feature. And what you're going to see on some of the things I'm going to show you and what Johan van der Merwe is going to talk to you about, many operators don't regard them as critical safety features. But when a collision occurs, and I see we've got some accident investigators like Craig Parker in here, due to so-called, not to say so-called brake failure, it has a huge impact, often results in tragic loss of life, serious injuries. So this subject, it's got an important role to play in keeping our roads safe, and our roads are not safe. They're not safe at all. Let's touch on the current situation on our roads. Why are we focusing on brakes? It's one aspect of road safety. We lack a culture of road safety. South Africa lacks it. The 10.2 million vehicles on the road, of which 360,000 are trucks. Estimated that there's 900,000 motor vehicle accidents per year. That's across the board. Hey? Motor cars, trucks, everyone. 900,000 per year. Average of 15,000 deaths every year. That's 43 deaths per day. And people say we've got a culture of road safety. You don't kill 43 people per day. Australia has nearly doubled the number of motor vehicles, yet under 10% of the number of fatalities. We're therefore 20 times worse than Australia, a country that doubled the number of motor vehicles than we do. Of course, there's other issues, like a traffic authority is not respected. They sort of known for taking bribes, but I can assure you there's some outstanding traffic officials out there. All, I think, in South Africa, all of us have failed because people don't really care. Why don't they care? Because the road accident scenario in South Africa has become a body count. We don't put names to the bodies, but every individual has a name as is important to someone. And of course, because when it becomes a body count, there's no accountability for an accident. Now, let me just linger on that. Internationally, road safety experts are moving away from the word accident and describing it as a crash. Might be a bit of semantics, but it's not. An crash, there's accountability for. An accident is, wow, it's nobody's fault. So we refer to them as crashes now. So why the subject? Why the myth of brake failure? I'm going to take you back to October 2014. This is a great example. It was on the N12 that a crash was described as the worst ever. One truck ran into 47 cars. Now, a report in one of the local newspapers said that a woman who they interviewed said that the driver was shocked after observing what his vehicle had done. And I'll show you what his vehicle had done. He kept saying, my brakes have failed, my brakes have failed. And he was as horrified as we were at the carnage. That's what the reporter said. On the scene was Transport Minister Dupo Peters, Transport Minister at that time. We've got Mr. Fix-It now. Says a preliminary investigation had revealed that the truck's brakes failed. A preliminary investigation. She was on the scene of the accident. Gauteng Transport MEC Ishmael Badi at the time said, it's shattering to have such large numbers of injured and dead people. Now, remember when I go back to road safety, brakes failed. My brakes have failed, says the driver. The transport minister, the truck's brake failed, the preliminary investigation. And the result of that is that A large number of injured and dead people resulted from that. It takes away all accountability. My brakes failed. Shame, no one could have done anything about it. The brakes failed. So let's move on. Leave it, the brakes failed. That's it. How often have you heard that? You see it in media reports. You see it when traffic officials are reporting on the scene. A truck barrages down a hill, smashes into cars, and a report comes, a truck whose brakes failed. It's a myth. It's a myth. Brakes don't fail. Why is it a myth? Let's look at the definition of a myth. A myth is a widely held but false belief or idea. False belief. It's widely held that brakes fail. It's a false belief or idea. It's a false excuse, and it takes away accountability. Brake failure is a false belief. My dear friend, the late Jack Webster, who many of you will know, would always say, brakes only fail when you fail to maintain them. And that is the key issue. That is the key issue. So let's have a look. This is a brake failure. See there, big in the center? Fail. That is on a brake roller tester. That is testing brakes that should be working on a brake roller tester. And that brake failed. You can see 0.5, 0.5. That is no brakes. That's a fail, but that's on a brake roller tester at a test center. This is a brake failure. Failure on a brake roller tester. You can see 0 brakes on that particular axle that's on the roller. That's a brake failure. But it's a brake failure on the brake roller tester, not on the road. This was not a brake failure. Look at that. Look at the scene. My brakes have failed. What brakes? What brakes? 47 cars lying all over the place. 4 people killed. I think we're 25 injured. And don't forget those injured. We never talk about the injured. But those people come out, some in wheelchairs, some with broken arms, some whose lives and their family lives have changed forever. The injured are not given enough attention. This is a video of that particular incident in Alberton. Look on the right, the bottom is the driver standing there. Listen to the crash. That. Can you play that again, please, Kylie? That was peak hour traffic in the morning. People taking their kids to school, people going to work. Now that, according to the driver, was because my brakes failed. That, according to the minister, was the preliminary investigation showed that the truck's brakes failed. Here's the reality. This is the story. I was on that scene. And I did the story. The truck with no brakes. That truck did not have brakes. The brakes did not fail. There were no brakes to fail. I'll take you close up. Look at that on the top left. That was the steering axle. Look at the gap between the drum and the shoe. Massive. You can float the Queen Mary in there. Impossible to break. That's one of the rear axles on the top right. Look at the gap and the broken shoe. And look at the bottom there, under the dust cover. Look at that big gap there. Massive. No brakes. How's that? That's on the same truck. There is nothing in the drum. That camshaft was all loose. There's nothing in the drum. How can brakes fail when it doesn't have brakes? No, there was no brake failure. There was no brake maintenance, and this was the result. It was carnage. It was a horror scene, the worst. I spoke to cops there. They've never seen anything like it. One truck whose brakes did not fail. The truck did not have brakes. And here, the driver said, my brakes have failed. FleetWatch says, what brakes? There were none. It's a myth. Brakes don't fail. It's a myth. That truck wasn't maintained for ages. It doesn't just happen overnight. This is the truck. Look at the little damage in the front. Look at there. How many do you see on the roads? It looks okay from outside, but when you go underneath, that is when you see the difference. And that is where brakes become important. I just want to touch on Brake and Tyre Watch. We started this many years ago, and we have wonderful partners with this. One of which is WAPCO right from the beginning. And we've got Bridgestone, Imperial, Mixed Telematics, BPW Axles, Captive Insurance, the South African Road Federation. We have all the manufacturers come on board. We alternate manufacturers with every event. We run over 30 events around the country. It's actually to train the cops to spot unroadworthy signs. So there, I'm giving you one thing, Alberton, and you look at those figures. But this is the results of our various brake and tire watch exercises. 764 trucks have been hands-on tested, physically tested, on brake roller testers, on the pits. We train the cops in them. We've discontinued 528, 69% failure rate. And I've got to say that most of the failure occurs on the trailer, and most of it is braking faults. A lot of tire faults, but mostly braking faults. 528 trucks out of 764 parked off the road, with the majority having brake problems. Brakes failed, sure. That pen, that is my hand, could be any of our expert trainers on brake and tire watch. And that pen, well, look at the gap. You can't do that. That's a brake booster hanging loose. Impossible to work. Impossible. So there's no brakes. There's another one. You might think that drum we showed you was unusual. No. Look at the one on the left. Nothing inside the drum. The one on the right. New brake shoe using cans. Look at the slack adjuster hanging loose there. Johan will be dealing with all that. Look at this, contaminated, totally contaminated. The hub bearings are just leaked all over. That's like trying to brake on an ice rink. We get a lot of that, totally contaminated. Lack of maintenance. This brake will not work. If it doesn't fail, it cannot brake. The air tanks are supposed to be drained every day. This is an example of one. We've seen worse than that. That's water coming out, gets into the air pipes. And we see some where it comes out as thick sludge. It's supposed to be drained every day. Brakes fail. Nah, not just faults like this. Yeah, the slack adjuster hanging loose. Let's look at top right. We're connected on the left to the booster. And look at it just hanging loose on the right. It's supposed to be connected to the booster with the push rod. Incorrect size brake boosters on both sides, called braking imbalance, can lead to jackknives and a lot of other problems. And there's another brake failure. That's a brake failure. Look at that truck on the brake tester, 0 and between 5 and 10. It's not even worth reading. There's nothing to read. That's a brake failure on the brake test. You will go out with that truck. It'll have a crash, not due to brakes failed, but be due to having no brakes. That 0 means no brakes. Here's a real bad one. How's this one? No brake boosters, slack adjusters on the left there. That's a general view. And a slack adjusters on the left, not connected. It can't be connected because there's no brake boosters. Was this years ago? No. This was about 2 weeks ago that I stopped at a breakdown. And I said to this fellow, I said, I'm not a cop, but I can't let you go back on the road. I'm calling the cops unless you tell me you're getting a tow truck to tow this up. This cannot go back on the road. And he said he had getting a tow truck. There's a story to this guy. He's lost all his money. Who's giving these guys contracts? Eh? Who? There's another one. Look at the incorrect settings there. Johan will go through all that. But this one on the right had a massive tire blowout. I stopped and I look out there and that is all incorrectly set. The slack adjusters all over the place. There's a manual and an automatic slack adjuster all mixed up. You find a lot of that. So this has got imbalanced braking. On a brake roller tester that would fail, Johan will tell you why just now. What do you see here that tells you no brakes? How do you identify it? These are some of the signs we showed. If you look at the drum on the side, you'll see rust inside it. Rust and dust. That shoe hadn't touched that drum for some time. Otherwise, it would be shiny and it would be clear there, but there is rust inside there. So there's no brakes on there. Brakes failed? No. Brakes didn't fail. The components are there. The brake hasn't been set. And there are consequences. The consequences. Takes just a second or two for such faults to end up killing people. And I see Craig Parker is on here, and he did the accident investigation, Do you remember Fields Hill? Have a look at Fields Hill. I want you to count the seconds from the time you see the truck coming in on your left. Look for the pedestrians walking across and the truck comes in. Count the seconds, each one of you. The pedestrians walking. Okay, as they start trucking, you'll get the truck now. 1, 2. I counted those seconds fast. Let's just see that again. And counted how fast it happens. It only takes a second when you've got no brakes, not brake failure. When you've got no brakes, it takes a second to kill 28 people. Brake failure, that was also put down by many as brake failure. It wasn't brake failure, it had no brakes. And so, 23 killed. Did I say 28? 23 killed. Isn't that amazing? I'd say 28, 23, a body count. Does anybody here know any one of those people or the name of any one of those people who were killed? Guaranteed not. But the brakes failed. No, the brakes did not fail. The operator failed to maintain the brakes and 23 people died as a result. The brakes failed. It's a myth. And that is why we're tackling that today. That's an introduction into the problems that we're facing out there. And I'd now like to introduce you. I've given an overall scenario to Johan van der Merwe. Johan van der Merwe, wonderful man. He's worked with us on Brake Tyre Watch for many years, very passionate. You want to come in there, Johan? There's the man there. And very passionate. Morning, Johan. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, and you?
I'm spot on, thank you. Thrilled to have you here, and all our delegates are thrilled to have you here as well. Johan's going to lead us through the maintenance of brakes and link to the trailer and the truck tractor, and he's going on the technical side now and show you that brakes don't fail and why they should not fail. So I'm going to opt out here. By the way, you can ask questions at the end. We should have time at the end because we don't make these too long. And otherwise, you can type in questions. Those that we don't get round to will be replied by email. And that comes from Germany, Zimbabwe, everybody. We got the whole world here today, Johan. So the world is yours. Educate us.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. All right, let's get right into it. Right, as Patrick said, myth of the brakes fail. First question is, can brakes fail? Patrick answered that question, no. You either fail to maintain them or maybe you fail to apply them. Okay, so as we said, can brakes fail? Brakes fail due to insufficient maintenance and or driver abuse. In this case, driver abuse will obviously be your driver training, depending on what vehicle you drive or what vehicles you own. The OE will obviously get involved with driver training for you. In this presentation, we'll look at the main cause of brake failures as a result of insufficient maintenance. We will be focusing on maintenance of trailers and the components connecting the truck tractor and the trailer. The biggest enemy of any brake system is heat. So keep that in mind because every single one of these items that we're going to be discussing will relate to heat at some stage. Okay, what exactly will we be covering? Is it possible for air brakes to fail? If so, why? And if not, why? We're going to focus on trailer air brake systems. Now, the reason why we focus on trailer air brake systems, you'll also notice with a lot of the Brake and Tyre Watch events that we've done, we focus a lot on trailer brakes. And the reason for that is, and I have to admit, it has changed over the last couple of years where the operators would have either an accredited workshop or their vehicles are actually under warranty or a service or maintenance plan. So they will get maintained pretty decently. But what happens to the trailer? It gets parked in the yard and the guys basically only work on them when something breaks. So we are going to be focusing on trailer brakes as well. What are the legal requirements? On the right-hand side, we've actually given you some of the SAN specs, the National Road Traffic Act regulations. So, all of these things are basically being used when we do our investigations, our checks, or even our Brake and Tyre Watch training. It's maybe a good idea also to maybe look at getting the National Road Traffic Act booked. We'll also actually give you some nice information on what is required for a trailer brake system. Okay, we're going to how to identify incorrect or illegal components and practices, understanding the function of each major air brake component, how poor maintenance can affect braking performance, or we can call it braking efficiency, and how to test the functionality of certain components. All right, so let's start off with the big question once again: can air brakes fail? The answer is no. But what happens if a pipe bursts or a fitting leaks or disconnect on the towing vehicle's air brake system? So obviously we're now looking at a truck tractor. The supply of your air comes from your truck tractor to your trailer. So obviously the whole combination has to get its air somewhere, which is from the truck. There's one major component fitted to a truck's air brake system that actually prevents the air brakes from actually failing if there's a loss of pressure in the system. Now, this is called a multi-circuit protection valve. You see we've got a couple of pictures there. Sometimes they've got up to 6, so that's why we call them multi-circuit protection valves. So what is a multi-circuit protection valve is the question. Well, very simple. We're not going to get into too much technical detail. What we are going to do right at the end is we'll have some contact details for either myself and we've also got Vic, who's our national training manager. And we can actually get into more details with you guys and actually do a proper technical training session with you. But just some background on it. This is basically there to protect each one of your 4 circuits that's on your truck tractor. So the 4 circuits, basically your front brake circuit, your rear brake circuit, your hand brake, and then obviously your 4th circuit will be auxiliaries. So if you actually have a loss of pressure on any one of those circuits, this system here would actually protect the other ones internally so you don't have pressure loss on all the systems at once. So once again, the brakes can't fail. Right. What happens then if we have an emergency brake circuit failure? So what happens if a pipe bursts or disconnects on the park brake or the emergency side of the truck? Now, we call it an emergency side. That will be most commonly, the red pipes are being used on your trailers and then on your trucks, mainly black hoses from the OEM, but we call it your emergency or your red circuit. Now, if your truck tractor fitted with spring brakes, it will basically have a park brake function, which is your emergency. They have purely mechanical applications when in the park position. So looking at the picture, you'll see this massive spring at the back here that actually does the park brake function. So when the park brake emergency line has a leak, or the spring brakes will basically apply, purely mechanical. If the leak is small and undetectable at first, the foundation brakes may start binding, causing excessive heat. Now there's that subject of heat coming up. That's the first one. So obviously we're going to try and avoid heat in foundation brakes. Okay. Excessive heat leads to low efficiency and ultimately brake failure. As Patrick said earlier, whether you have no brake shoe in the drum, or in this case, you've got too much heat on a brake shoe, you lose efficiency on the actual material, which means we see that as brake failure.
Johan, can you hear me? I interrupt. On your last point there, excessive heat leads to low efficiency, ultimately brake failure. Correct. Would that, we're talking that brakes don't fail, would that not be more accurately brake fade?
As we said, yeah, it'll be brake fade, but you know, like we say, the guys will normally turn around and say, yeah, but I had brake failure. Yeah, it's because you don't have efficiency in your lining material anymore. So, I mean, how many guys have applied the brake and said, but I put my foot right onto the floor and it had no brakes. So once again, it's like you say, brake fade, which they see as brake failure. And I think it's why I say inverted commas, because they'll basically say that's their brake failure they had.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. There's one item which normally seems to be left in the out of most of these presentations, even the training sessions that we do, and something we've actually picked up recently is on the truck trackers, some focus areas. There's a common mistake during the foot valve replacement on a truck, where you've got your supply pipes on your port 1.1 and 1.2 going to your foot valve. We've given you a little drawing here. We can also share you a larger drawing for you that actually shows you where they've gone and actually swapped the two across the pipes on the port 1.1 and 1.2 on the park brake circuit. Then what actually happens is there'll be no service brakes on the truck at all. You will have service brakes on the trailer. Now, what happens there is obviously your combination is designed in such a way where all your braked wheels have basically got a certain function to be able to stop a combination with the efficiency on each axle basically combined to stop the combination. So if I've only now got brakes on my trailer, no brakes on my truck tractor, I'm doing all the braking on the trailer, that's obviously a problem. So now because we don't have truck brakes, we only have trailer brakes, once again, we're going to have an issue. So this is also something to look at if you do foot valve changes to make sure that the piping is correct. Right, if we look at the front of the trailer, so let's look at the coupling. So this is obviously connecting your truck tractor to your trailer. Most of the guys know Susie pipes. So I don't even know why they call them Susies. A lot of guys ask me, I said, it's just industry standard worldwide. Everybody calls them Susie. So, okay, so if anybody knows why it's called a Susie, please let us know. All right, let's start on the truck tractor side here on the left-hand side. You see it made a nice big heart there, and then at the bottom you got our yellow. So there's your red. Remember we said that's your emergency side, which we said is the blood supply of your combination. So that is required by truck and tractor to actually have brakes. Your yellow line is your service line. That obviously only gets air to your trailer when you apply the brakes on the truck. On the right-hand side will be your trailer. Those will only be fitted with couplings, in this case a semi-trailer. All right, so the first thing that we're going to look at, let's look at some of the basics of what is the right thing to do when it comes to fitting couplings to a trailer or to a truck in this case. Okay, so your Susies are mounted to your truck. You have the couplings on your trailer. Now, how do we know which coupling goes where? Because the South African National Standard Spec says you have to have non-interchangeable couplings. All right, so what does non-interchangeable mean? Which means we can't have 2 males and 2 female couplings. It has to be 1 male and 1 female. Okay, so we got male into female on the service line. We got female to male on your emergency line, and we also have the tags. Now, the traffic department does like looking for these little tags here. So if you do have trailers without tags, it's best you try and get a hold of a couple of emergency and service line tags, or maybe some yellow and red little stickers, and just stick them on the trailer, because they do like actually looking for those things. Right, what we've done on this little drawing is we've actually added at the bottom here a little what we call a shuttle valve. And I'm sure everybody is aware there's a little shuttle valve in the male coupling on the yellow line. And then on your female, on the inside of that, it's called a striker or a operating plug. Now, what this operating plug does, it actually opens up the male coupling on the Susie from the horse. Okay, I've actually noted here, insufficient airflow on brake release equals trailer brake bind. So that is actually quite dangerous.
Johan, sorry, may I interrupt? I don't know if other people had the same problem, but the internet seemed to be interrupted there. I'm going to take a chance and assume people had the same problem. Could you go back to the former slide, please, Johan? It came through very jerky. The new technology. Remember the old days?
Yeah.
No, you can't. Sorry, Ken.
Okay, is that one?
Yeah, but the first slide, I think, was very jerky on the speech. Okay. All right. Let's carry on. And sorry, Johan, carry on where you are now.
Okay. All right. Happiness. This one here, front trailer couplings, Patrick. Okay. All right. So a couple of things that we have to look at when it comes to the maintenance, and obviously also to make sure we don't have this trailer brake bind, which once again can cause a hell of a lot of heat in your foundation brakes. Two issues with that: either you have a trailer on fire, which actually does happen, or you have the brake fade, which means insufficient brakes. Okay. On your male coupling, as we said, there is a little shuttle valve in there. We've actually just given 2 part numbers as an example of what has to be in there, and obviously your striker plug. It has happened that guys have bought used trailers or are running trailers where they've actually removed the striker plug, and the reason for that is maybe they've had a breakdown somewhere, as I said, bought a used trailer, never even looked at it and just changed the coupling, and it does not have a striker or operating plug in it. Now you connect your truck to it that has a male coupling with a shuttle valve, and there's no striker to actually open it. That's the first problem. So you assume that you have brakes on your trailer, but you actually don't. All right. So make sure you have got a striker plug inside your female, and obviously your shuttle valve inside your male does not sit too far in or to stick out too much on the outside. This is actually because of the size of the washer that you actually fit there. What we can do is as we said, we can always run through a little fleet survey with the guys, and we can give them more information, show them what the correct coupling arrangements actually look like, just to understand of the issues that can be out there. Okay, so let's have a look at the couplings. This one, for example, you can see is completely wrong. First of all, they're not attached to the trailer correctly, which means you can actually have issues with it down the line where it actually damages the pipe. Then you've got 2 female couplings, which is obviously incorrect. And this is the correct way of actually having the coupling arrangement. So you have your male and your female with your tags. You also have your plug for your electrical connections. And this one here, everybody knows it as an ABS plug or as a permanent power plug for your ABS. So that is actually the correct setup. On the side of your trailer, another thing to look at is obviously also data plates. We do mention the data plates because the data plates are being used for a lot of the brake settings. So it's important to note, number one is the date on your manufacturing data plate. If your vehicle does not have a data plate, you'll have to get in touch with your OEM, manufacturer of the trailer, and actually get a data plate from them. The reason for that is it has to have your chassis number on it, which the traffic department will also look at it. And obviously we need the manufacturing date. Now, the reason for the manufacturing date is as of the 14th of February 2004, all the trailers built after that date has to have ABS and automatic slack adjusters. Right, then the second one will be your data plate for your braking system. We always say that's the Bible. No matter what religion you are, that is the Bible for you to be able to actually maintain your vehicle, because that has also got all the brake specs on it and the adjustments that you need to be able to make sure that your vehicle is set correctly or your braking system is set correctly. Right, some of the components, some of the items that you can check on a regular basis. On a park brake, for example, you have to make sure it's visible, easily accessible. It has to be. Right, check for functionality, obviously the park brake application and release. Make sure that there's no leaks after that. If it does leak, obviously you have to replace it, because a leak on this valve can actually cause a brake bind once again, because this is mounted to your or piped into your emergency line. As you said, emergency line is your main heart, it's your blood supply to your trailer. If you cut that off, trailer brakes come on, as you said, through the spring brakes. Right, it has to be marked with a tag as well. Same as the front of the trailer with your red emergency, yellow service line tags. You have to have a tag above it. And then air reservoirs. Patrick also showed you a picture of all the water being drained out of the tank. Now, it's important to make sure there's no water in the system. There's a couple of reasons for that. Besides the obvious that it's actually wet and it can cause issues to the inside of your tanks and your piping. A lot of the components are actually little O-rings and the rubber diaphragms and everything inside the valves. They've got a specific lubricant that actually is supposed to protect it and make the system work properly. Now, when you take water and you actually mix it with this lubricant, it sometimes actually forms like a crystallized paste, which is actually not good for any of the air components on the inside. So it can damage your valves. So in that instance, once again, you're going to have braking issues because the valves aren't functioning properly. Then the other issue is you do a brake calculation that says you need an X amount of air for a certain amount of brake applications on your vehicle, and you must still have air in your tanks. So if I take half the air out and I put water in there, I won't have sufficient air supply to actually do the job that it's supposed to on the vehicle. So you actually lose air volume. Right, so on this slide, we're going to start off by, let's look at ABS. Now, ABS can also cause the myth of brake failure. And the reason for that is if the surface is smooth enough and you do get brake lockup, the drivers don't necessarily know they've actually had brake lockup, especially if the surface is wet and it doesn't leave any black lines from the tires or anything like that. The driver says, I had my foot flat on the floor, the vehicle had no brakes. It's not because it didn't have brakes, because it didn't have sufficient ABS interventions for him to be able to stop or actually maneuver the vehicle. So we have to look at ABS as well and what should be done or can be done to make sure that your ABS is maintained. Okay, what is the meaning of that, of ABS itself? It's anti-lock braking system. So let's have a look at this video. This video will actually show you the vehicle with anti-lock braking system and the vehicle without. All right, first vehicle, he had no ABS, so we have full lockup. Guy had absolutely no control over the vehicle, where the second vehicle had ABS. All right, so what is the main function of ABS? Now, ABS is there to help you with steerability of a vehicle. It doesn't necessarily give you shorter stopping distance. The guys have had this argument for many, many years, especially on cars, saying, but you're supposed to have shorter stopping distance. Not necessarily. Reason for that is you have to look at tire condition, tire temperatures, road surface, there's atmospheric pressure, there's all these calculations that they do. So what the main function of ABS actually is so that you can actually steer the vehicle. It gives you the opportunity to avoid whatever is in your way. if you look at even the Fields Hill and all those accidents, I mean, if the driver had a chance to actually maneuver the vehicle, he might have had the opportunity to actually get away. Okay. So as we said, 14th of February 2004, ABS is mandatory on all trailers, and we've just added in the automatic slack adjusters. So I've just thrown a little bit of a picture in here. You can actually see we've got the dog on the left-hand side with ABS on, and you can see that's what we call modulation, and there's full lockup, ABS, non-ABS. For anybody that's maybe done some advanced driving many years ago, prior to all this fancy ABS and EBD and all those things, if you look at your little 1400 Buckies or maybe Golf 1, if you on the brakes and the road is wet, there's absolutely no ways, no matter what you do with the steering wheel, it's going to go in the same direction it was going in before the lockup, no matter what you do with the steering. So what you obviously need to do is you need the wheels to actually turn, because the vehicle will then follow the direction of the wheels that are actually turning. Hence the reason we needed to actually let go of the brakes a couple of times to see if we can actually steer the vehicle. So that's what we call modulation. Right. Okay, so let's look at some of the things that you can have a look at to make sure that your ABS system is actually functioning correctly. First of all, we obviously need to know, how do we check if there's any faults on the system? How do we know there's a correct power supply and all of that? First of all, we're going to look at the green light on the front of the trailer. That green light is actually there to show the guys if there's any ABS faults on the vehicle. A lot of times you say, oh, but the driver puts his foot on the brake, the light comes on, yep, my brakes are working. The green light's actually there for ABS fault diagnostics, and we're going to show you on the next slide how that's actually done. All right, ISO 7638, which is this one on the top right-hand side, that is your, everybody knows it as ABS power plug. It's a 7-pin permanent power supply. That is actually for permanent power from your ignition. So once your ignition on your vehicle is on, your ABS or your EBS valve will have permanent power supply, not just when you apply the brakes. And there's a couple of reasons for that, and we'll get into that just now. Okay, if this unit is attached, then the green light on the side of the trailer will not work, and there is actually a dashboard warning light, which we'll show you now, that will actually come on. This light comes in, you know there's a fault on your system, and you need to obviously get into the diagnostics of the system. Right, ABS systems have a stoplight backup. A lot of the newer EBS systems as well have a stoplight backup through your fender plug, which we said is this one on the right-hand side. Normal lighting plug, everybody knows is a fender plug. So if you don't have your permanent power connected, or it fails for whatever reason, if you apply the brakes, you will have power to give you the ABS function on both those valves. ABS and EBS valves must cycle with 4 clicking sounds if the correct power is supplied. So if you use the ISO socket, you put your ignition on, you must actually hear the ABS and the EBS valve actually clicking. Those are the modulators doing a self-test. If you have stoplight power through your fender plug, like on your ABSs, once you put your foot on the brake and the driver holds it there, go and actually listen to see if the valve is actually cycling. If the valves don't cycle, it means they don't have the correct power supply, which means they will not work. Biggest issue these days is if a lot of the insurance companies have actually started realizing that, you know, how to test for ABS. So they'll actually go out and they'll say, listen, can I get a report? Has the ABS been tested? Can we do a test on the ABS? If the ABS actually fails their test, the insurance company is not going to pay out. All right, so remember, if your ISO 7638 is connected permanent or ignition power, then the green light doesn't work. The fender plug has got your stoplight backup, and that's obviously the one that's got the little green light on it. All right, so just got a video to show you. This is an ABS valve. It's been fitted in a little test box, but you've got your ABS valve there. There's your stop light, so it'll show you the red light comes on. There's your green light on the front of the trailer. We fitted a handheld tester to it just to show you if there's any faults or no faults, but this is to show you how the green light should operate. Okay, so there you can hear the clicking noise from the modulators with the stoplight power. Okay, tells you which system it is. There's a little handheld tester that we have available. Okay. All right, Carly, can we just play that one again? I just think it skipped the first part. Okay, so you'll see now you'll switch it on, apply the brake light power. Look at the green light on the top right hand side, comes on. 3 seconds, it's supposed to go off to tell you no faults on the system. If there is a fault on the ABS system, that green light will actually stay on. All right, right. If the wiring is done correctly, then that's the correct function of the green light. We have noticed that sometimes the wiring is done incorrectly, where they've actually wired the green light directly from the stoplight power supply. So directly from that little light, they've actually wired it. So what happens when you apply the brakes? The light comes on and stays on, like we will see on a lot of the trailers. So what can we do to actually make sure that the ABS is functioning correctly and doesn't have any faults on it? First of all, obviously diagnostics, you can actually buy those in. We can come through, any of our distributors or our service partners can come and actually do a diagnostic test on any of your vehicles. But there's a couple of things that you can do in your workshop to make sure that your ABS is functioning correctly without having all the expensive equipment. Right. Let's have a look at EBS quickly, because obviously we have to see the difference between ABS and EBS and what to look for to know how to diagnose the system. First of all, EBS systems. What is the meaning of the abbreviation EBS? It's called electronic brake system. Now, the reason it's called electronic is because it actually uses CAN signals as well over and above your pneumatic signal for brake applications and all kinds of other functions which we'll mention now. So how do I identify if, for example, the WAPCO EBS is fitted? On the right hand side, you'll see there's actually what the valve looks like, and then you'll have a slightly different brake calculation or brake data plate on the vehicle. Another very important function built into an EBS system is RSS or roll stability. Now, that's basically a rollover mitigation system that's been fitted to it. And that's obviously also important to a lot of the new vehicles that are being built. For example, your tankers, you'll see a lot of your tankers are not coming with EBS as standard because a lot of the clients actually want them to run some sort of rollover stability system. So EBS actually has got that built-in standard. What's obviously important, we've made a note at the bottom there for you. It says that the ISO permanent power plug has to be connected, because especially with RSS doesn't need power from the stoplight. It's not the same as an ABS where you apply the brakes, now you need ABS to function. RSS works all the time. As long as your ISO socket is connected or your SUSE is plugged in, RSS will work. There's other functions as well, auto-lifting axles, as you said, CAN communication between your truck and your trailer, and electronic load sensing. Now, this is all done as long as you have the correct power supply, which in this case is permanent power. So let's look at roll stability. We've got a bit of a short video here just to show you what the difference actually is between a vehicle with RSS and a vehicle without RSS. Okay, so top one, obviously your system is off, and the bottom, the system is working. So what it does, it obviously uses the inside and outside wheel speed sensors, plus accelerometers on the inside of the unit that actually measures the tilt angle, the inside-outside wheel speed difference. All of those factors it takes, does a calculation, and it actually uses the brakes on the trailer to actually stop the vehicle from rolling. And the driver actually doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to apply the brakes or anything like it, as long as he's running the ISO socket. Right, so let's look at the ISO socket. As we said, here we've showed you, you basically have warning lights on the dashboard. If this unit is connected, your green light in your trailer won't work. So if you have ABS with a green light, then you'll see that the green light won't work. It'll show you a fault actually on the dashboard. On the right-hand side, you've actually got the layout of the ISO wiring. If you guys need more information on that, please give us a shout. We can always supply this to you just to see how you should be testing it. For example, you've got your pin 1 and pin 2, which we know permanent and ignition power. Which ones are your earths, CAN lines, and all of that. We can actually show you which ones you can actually check to make sure that you've got the correct power supply to your system. All right, I've got a picture here of a pole wheel exciter ring. Question always comes in is, but what should the gap actually be between that pole wheel and that ABS wheel speed sensor? So if you do a hub service, you've taken your hub off, there's a couple of things that you need to do before you actually put the hub back. First of all, make sure your pole wheel is in a good condition. Make sure that it's clean. Check the front of the sensor. The front of these sensors sometimes do get tiny holes in them, and because they've actually got a magnet inside them, you tend to get a lot of this metal flakes from the braking system that goes into this unit and it stops it from functioning. So it's not something you can necessarily see with the naked eye, but it actually does stop the unit from functioning correctly. So make sure the pole wheels are clean, make sure they're in good order, make sure the teeth are not damaged, and then obviously put the hub back. And then the question is, what should the gap be? And we've made a note that we said no gap. These are fitted with little copper bushes, which means they can be, the sensor itself can actually be pushed in and out. The best thing to do is push the sensor in right up against the pole wheel. Once you start moving the vehicle, it will actually knock it out to the exact measurement that's required for the system to operate properly. There's a couple of other tests that can be done as well to make sure that your ABS sensor is actually picking up the pole wheel. Simple test with a multimeter. We can come in and show you guys exactly how to do that test. It's very simple. Don't need diagnostics for just a little multimeter to actually test to make sure that it is working correctly. Okay. Let's have a look at the data plate on the side of the vehicle. As we said, you have to have the data plate, the brake calculation one. And here's a couple of the settings that we're going to get into, which is also very important. Now, these settings, if they're not done correctly, they can obviously also cause issues down the line with brake lining wear or insufficient lining efficiency. Vehicles will fail COF, etc., etc. And obviously the so-called brake failure, as mentioned. Right, brake booster and slack adjuster settings. Now, that is a brake booster. I'm sure we all know that. But how do we know what is the correct brake booster that should be fitted to a vehicle? And what are the settings once you've replaced a booster? Now, that's all given to you on your data plate. The first one that we're going to look at is, obviously, if it's got information stamped or marked next to it, it means that's the amount of axles that your vehicle has. So if you get to your vehicle and you've got a 2-axle, but you have got a data plate with information on for 3 axles, is obviously an issue either with the data plate or there was a modification done to the vehicle somewhere in its lifetime. If it's a new vehicle and the data plate is incorrect, please get the manufacturer to organize you the correct data plate, because the traffic department will also look into this. And if you've had an accident, the insurance companies will also actually have a look at it and say, you know what, the data plate does not match the vehicle. So there's obviously an issue there. So that will raise a red flag. Make sure the data plate and the settings on the vehicle is actually exactly the same. But first of all, brake booster is 2430, 2430, which means it's a dual diaphragm booster, which means it's, as we always explain to the traffic department guys, it's got 2 pipes going into it. So if it's got 1 pipe, it's an incorrect booster. So 2 pipes will be 1 service, 1 emergency. We have to make sure that if the data plate says it has to have a dual diaphragm or a spring brake booster on it, it has to have one, because that's for the parking brake. The 2430 is obviously the size. That will be your diaphragm size on the inside in square inches for the surface area. So 24, the rear is a 30, which means obviously your booster will be slightly smaller in the front than at the rear. So if you get to a booster where the front and the rear is the same size, but your data plate says 2430, clearly there's obviously an issue there. That will affect the braking. Next to it is a little bit of a confusing one, which is lever length. We're going to get into that one now. Bottom right-hand side or top right-hand side, those are all your brake settings for your load sensing valves, which we'll get into now. Right, if we have a look at this picture at the bottom left-hand side, that clearly tells us there's an issue there. There's different stroke lengths as well on these spring brakes or the dual diaphragm booster. So if you replace a booster on your trailer, make sure that you replace with the same one that you've basically taken off the vehicle. So on the left-hand side will be a long stroke, right-hand side will be a short stroke. Obviously, different stroke lengths means different outputs, which means you'll have different braking between your left and your right wheel. Okay, so that's obviously wrong. I've made a note here of a caging bolt. It's important. You have to have this caging bolt in here. That is what they can use without having to disconnect the slack adjusters from the actual spring brake. They use that to pull back that big spring in the back when you have a breakdown or an accident, so they can move the vehicle. So that's actually one of the requirements according to law. You must have a caging bolt on all your spring brakes. So, right. Okay, so let's have a look at that lever length setting that we just mentioned now. So there we have it at 127. So 127 is in millimeters. That's measured from the center of the S-cam shaft to the hole in the slack adjuster. If you're not sure, because some slack adjusters might have just in this case like 2 holes, some might have 4, some might have 6. If you're not sure, easy, just take a tape measure, make sure it's in the right hole. Reason for that is the moment you change this setting, you actually change the output. So which means the performance or the efficiency of that specific unit changes when I actually change the setting. It's the same as a wheel spanner. The longer the spanner, the more power you have. In this case, this has got to do with this stroke length and how much output you need according to the stroke length, because that will change in accordance to where you actually put the little clevers in. So make sure that you put those clevers into the correct hole based on the data plate. If your left and your right is on 2 different settings, check the data plate, make sure that you put both in the same setting and the correct setting, because it can affect your brake efficiency. You'll also see when you go to the rolling road and you do have a left and a right slack adjuster setting that's different, you will actually fail on the rolling road with an imbalance between the left and the right wheel. Right. We also mentioned automatic slack adjusters. Now, automatic slack adjusters were basically brought into, because the guys are saying, well, you know, we replaced the linings, we've got manual slack adjusters, we set them, the gap is correct, everything's hunky-dory. As you said, now the guy goes, they run the vehicle for 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, don't see the vehicle, it comes back, it's in and out the workshop, they never actually check the clearance between the drum and the lining. So as the lining is wearing, the gap's actually getting bigger. So they said, well, let's bring automatic slack adjusters into play to actually help take up that gap between the brake shoe and the drum as the lining is wearing. So it basically works like a ratchet. So as you apply the brake, take some of the material away, it keeps the gap the same as it was set. So it's important to make sure that if your vehicle is built after the 14th of February 2004 and there's manual slack adjusters on it, they have to be changed to automatic slack adjusters, which is required. Because as Patrick showed you earlier, I mean, there's some massive gaps between the brake linings and the drums. And that's caused a lot of times by running a manual slack adjuster that's not set or checked on a regular basis. Okay. Let's look at load sensing valves. As I said earlier, there was a data plate that showed you little load sensing valve settings. Why are the vehicles fitted with load sensing valves? Obviously, load sensing valves are fitted to a vehicle to compensate for the amount of weight that you've loaded. So less weight, you need less brakes. The more weight, you need more brakes. So obviously, how do we increase the braking pressure? By fitting a load sensing valve. So how do we check the trailer's load sensing valves? This is part of the maintenance and also a good way to check it on a regular basis, especially if you see there's some very strange lining wear differences between a truck and a trailer. The ultimate goal is to achieve combination brake harmonization is basically what we call it. So what it means is if you look at this little picture, we're saying each one of these wheels, as I mentioned earlier, it's got a certain job or a task to actually break the combination as a whole. So each of those need a certain pressure to give you a certain efficiency to be able to break the combination as it should. So as we said earlier, if the truck doesn't have any brakes, for example, they swap the 2 pipes around on the foot brake valve, and only the trailer is doing all the braking, you actually have insufficient braking for the combination, which means you're going to have under braking on the truck, over braking on the trailer, and that's where all your problems start. So as we said, truck and trailer need to manage the combination. So it's important, first of all, to check the load sensing valves on the trailer to make sure that that is correct in accordance to the calculation that was done for the braking system. Here's a big question we always ask the fleets. Guys, do you guys actually have air test gauges? So you have to look at getting air test gauges. A lot of tests that can be done and a lot of issues that can be avoided if you have test gauges and you can actually test it. So we've given you a part number there. You can write it down if you want. Give us a shout. I mean, we can supply you with a nice test gauge kit. It's got all the fittings, all the attachments and everything that you need to actually do the test. But they are very important. You can't work on air brakes without gauges. All right, let's look at the first load sensing setting. So there's your data plate. This is a mechanical unit. How do we know that? Obviously, we have a little rod that it's attached to the axle because we've got a mechanical suspension. The first 2 that we marked is your lever length and your deflection. Those are important because it's also a calculation that gets done. And on your data plate, it will give you your lever length. It will give you your deflection. The lever length is obviously from the center of that little arm to where it goes down onto the rod that goes to the axle. So that's in millimeters as well. Deflection is always a bit of a difficult one because it depends on where the valve's been fitted. So that will obviously be your movement from laden to unladen, which we mean empty to full. Now, how do we do that in mid-air? Very difficult. We always say to the guys, when you actually fit the load sensing valve, just make sure that it's completely horizontal and start doing your test from there. You'll know whether you should go up or down with a little shaft to increase or decrease the brake pressure. But obviously, just start horizontal and take it from there. It makes life a lot easier. When it comes to air suspensions, we all know that those have got airbags. So there's no way to actually adjust the height. Your airbags or your air suspension vehicle tries to maintain or will maintain the same ride height, whether you load it with 10 tons or 30 tons, doesn't matter, the ride height stays the same. So there must be a way that we actually check the weight. So what we do is we actually use the airbag pressure. So airbag pressure will go up as the pressure as the weight actually goes up. It's the same as your little plate on the inside of your door of your own car. It's got 3 little stick men there. Then you know that's empty vehicle. I have to run 2 bar pressure. Then it shows you 5 stick men and 2 briefcases. Now they ask you to increase your tire pressure to 2.8 bar. Reason for that is they want to maintain the same sidewall height on the tire. So we actually want to keep the ride height of the vehicle the same on the trailer. So what do? We increase the bag pressure to maintain the same height. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so we look at the data plate now on your air suspension vehicle. So as we, sorry, this is a mechanical suspension still. So there you've got attachment to your suspension. So how do you check the pressure? We've got an input pressure, and then we've got an output pressure. Those are the two that you have to obviously check. So we always check load sensing valves unladen. And the reason for that is because when you go onto a laden weight, which is a full vehicle, we have what we call a 1-to-1 ratio. So you can't actually check a load sensing valve when it's laden, because whatever pressure you send into the trailer is going to go out to your booster. So you'll have to have it unladen. Then the two pressures are actually marked on the data plate. So you can actually put your gauges on. You can put 6.5 bar into your load sensing valve. Make sure the pressure that comes out to your booster is actually what it says on the data plate. Because in the long run, that can also affect your brake efficiency. So if your combination is set up correctly from a truck, the OEM will give you the specs on the truck. Obviously, the trailer system, if we've supplied the system, we can give you all the system information as per the data plate. If all those pressures are set correctly, you'll have basically the best combination that you can get. Right. So if we look at the air suspension, as we mentioned earlier, we have to check the pressure somehow because we can't, the ride height doesn't change. So there's a third pressure that comes in, which is an air bellow pressure. For example, you'll have 1.1 bar unladen. As we said, as the vehicle actually wants to drop down as you load it, the airbag pressure will pick up. So in this case, it's 4.7. So we're going to check it unladen. So still 6.5 bar in. That's the pressure that we use to do the check. Your output pressure on your booster, also on the data plate, in this case it's 2.8 bar. And then your third pressure you can check to make sure, because if your air bellow pressure is not correct, that will affect your output pressure on your booster. So you said if you've got your test gauges, very simple, your booster, there'll be test points on the booster, should have test points on your servo side. Your load sensing valves, both your mechanical and your air suspension, on your port 4. Port 4 is a signal port that will have a test point. That's where you put your gauges. 6.5 in as per the data plate. Your output pressure will be as per the data plate. And then obviously, as we said, third pressure, just make sure your air bellow pressure is correct. If these settings aren't correct, you will obviously have issues with your efficiencies. Right, just one thing to note on your EBS, as we mentioned earlier, that's managed electronically, the load sensing. So it won't have a separate load sensing valve. It's actually managed by the EBS itself. So in this case, no need to actually check it, because it's actually set electronically by software. So it's basically 100% accurate. Right. So now we've looked at all those little settings. So we've looked at booster sizes, the lever lengths, we've looked at slack adjuster settings, we've looked at load sensing valve settings. Here we've got little pictures of all of them. So what are the legal requirements? Earlier, Patrick showed you little pictures of those needles on the rolling road. So there's obviously efficiencies that they look at. And if any of these aren't set correctly, and you've got different size boosters, you don't have correct load sensing valve settings, you have slack adjusters set incorrectly in the incorrect lever lengths, you won't get to these brake efficiencies, or you'll have issues getting there, or you will fail your COF. First of all, brake efficiencies for each vehicle. You've got a 50% for trucks, drawbars, and center trailers. So that's what they look at when they do the rolling road. 45% for semi-trailers, and then an imbalance of maximum 30%. So for example, if you have two different brake boosters which have got different stroke lengths, and you don't make the correct adjustments on the lever lengths, you can have an imbalance between left and right. So over braking or under braking on the one, and vice versa. So that will cause issues on lining wear, and obviously you will fail on that axle, because the two wheels together don't give you the efficiency you should have on that axle, and you will fail. So that obviously makes for, like we say, unsafe vehicle. So if we look at all those issues, what are the results of insufficient maintenance? So if you don't do your load sensing valve checks properly, you have a breakdown somewhere, you change your booster with incorrect size, you don't change the booster when it comes back into your yard, you have leaking pipes somewhere, red line might leak somewhere, you've got slight brake bind, yellow line's got a leak, you've got no brakes on your trailer. I mean, the list is endless. You can have increased lining wear in either truck or trailer. As you said, if the trailer is doing all the braking, truck's hasn't got any brakes, you'll have lining wear issues on your trailer. We've got guys that will phone us up often and say, listen, I'm running this truck and this trailer. The two are married, which means we don't swap them around. But my truck has got excessive lining wear. Then we found out, okay, trailer's got no brakes. What happens? It's moving all that work from the trailer onto the truck. Truck does all the braking. Obviously, you're going to have high lining wear on your truck. Like we said, give us a shot. We come in, we can actually help you guys to actually solve these issues by looking at both the truck and the trailer braking systems. Increased braking instability, increased possibility of accidents. We've seen the videos, we've seen the photos. I mean, it's horrific. At the end of the day, it's important to make sure that things are right, to try and avoid these accidents as much as possible. Instability, as we said, ABS is an important one. A lot of guys are saying, but the ABS valve is leaking, so I just threw it out and I put in a relay valve. The problem is you've got no steerability if the vehicle's got lockup. So it is definitely an issue. Insufficient braking performance, failed COFs. As I said, it's not a nice thing to have to send your vehicle 2, 3, 4, 5 times back to the roadworthy to get your COF done. Ultimately, it's an unsafe vehicle. Once again, leads back to accidents. Increased downtime due to unexpected breakdowns. Like I said, I have to admit, I mean, it's changed over the last couple of years where the guys have started really looking into their trailers and not just, they don't just focus on the truck. Guys always used to say what the truck's making the money, but they don't realize without the trailer, you don't have a combination. Where do you put your load? So it's important, make sure that your trailer brakes are maintained. And then all of that goes right back down to the myth of the brakes failed. Like we said, the brakes don't fail. It's the simple things. Read your data plate. Make sure you got the correct size boosters. Make sure you got your settings correct. And so, guys, you will have the presentation when we're done. You'll have our contact details. Please give us a shout. I mean, we can always sit you guys down. We can run through it. We also do some training courses. We can actually do it in person. Obviously, we stick to COVID protocols. At the end, I've also got, as I said, Vic, our training manager's contact details. He runs a lot of online courses, even at night, weekends, which is nice for the guys that can't take a lot of time off of work. So that will also help. So we can try and avoid this myth of the brakes failed, because as I said, brakes don't fail. You either don't maintain them, you don't apply them, or your driver hasn't had the correct training, so he actually abuses the brakes. Because obviously a lot of things on your vehicle that's there to help your vehicle brake. And if the driver's not trained properly, he's obviously not going to use them as he should. And there's one subject that we always discuss, because as a company that sells a good quality, genuine OE product, we see a lot of the cheap alternatives out there. Some pirates, they call it, some they call them Chinese, whatever they want to do. But what we're trying to say is try and use genuine parts where you can. I mean, you know that even in your personal life with your own vehicle, if you have an issue and you need a part replaced, you're going to try where you can to replace with the OE part, because you know it's your own safety, it's your own vehicle. The truck is not any different. I mean, it's still your company's vehicle, it's your driver, it's your customer's product on the back. So we say use genuine parts. If you use genuine parts, you avoid the increased lining wear issues because you're running genuine parts. You avoid that increased braking instability, and obviously increasing accidents. Insufficient braking performance, failed COFs, and unsafe vehicles. So we're going to try and avoid that by using genuine parts. Increased downtime due to unexpected breakdowns. As we said, use OE parts. I mean, the lifespan is a lot longer. You also have the backup and the support. I mean, if any of these products fail and they're not supposed to fail, I mean, we're there in a flash. I mean, that's why genuine is the way to go. Bottom line, loss of income. I mean, obviously, guys out there that are operators, that are business owners, you understand how all these things can actually hurt your back pocket. Yes, a lot of times people say, well, but you know what, genuine parts are expensive. I said, but in the long run, what is the actual cost of a genuine part? If I look at some of that footage that Patrick showed us, I mean, you're looking at a couple of million. How many lives are lost because the guys want to save 20 or 30 Rand on a part? All right. So at the bottom of the slide, you see we've actually said genuine. There's obviously us as WAPCO. We've actually got a second tier product called Provia, which we call a genuine alternative. So I know I'm going to throw some OE names around, but if you look at Toyota and Lexus, for example, same company, WAPCO is Lexus, Provia is basically Toyota, if that makes sense to anybody. So if there's an alternative available from a OE manufacturer, I mean, it's ideal to actually use that, because you've still got the same service, the same backup. We still cover the warranties, the same manufacturing plants, etc., etc. So where you can, I mean, give a guys a shot. Say, listen, I'm running WAPCO, but I'm looking at costs as there may be an alternative. Let the guys have a look and see if Profia's actually got an alternative for you. There are a couple of components out there that can be replaced. You give an example. I mean, this is just one of the little posters that we do. I mean, we even do a range of brake pads through it. I mean, that's still basically seen as an OE part. I mean, you still got the backing. cab leveling valves, air Suzies, electrical Suzies, clutch servos, leveling valves for your trailers, all those small components which aren't very expensive, but it can become expensive in the long run. Buy OE or genuine OE, if you want to call it that, if possible. Just it also helps in the long run when it comes to warranty and support, even on your OE vehicles. For example, your trailer builder, I mean, they're in contact with some of the guys like ourselves, and I mean, the backup and the support will definitely be there. Makes a hell of a lot of sense to rather go that route than go aftermarket or cheap Chinese, if you want to call it that. Right, our information will obviously be shared by Patrick and them. Like I said, we will also supply you with Vic, who's our national training manager's information. We do, like I said, I myself actually do some online training with the fleets on site, and we take your guys for a day or two, and we actually run through all of this information on a vehicle for them so they can physically see what it looks like. And then Vic obviously runs all these online courses, which helps the guys that can't actually take some time off of work, so they can do it after hours or on weekends. I mean, you can arrange with Vic. He's got no problems doing it any time when the guys are available, so you can always give him a shot. All right, thank you very much. I know it's quite quick, quite a lot of information, but as you said, we're there. Guys, give us a shout if you get stuck with any of this or you're not sure about anything. Thanks, Patrick. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Johan. I hope you all found, judging by some of the comments there, it's been very well received and well presented by yourself there, Johan. Thank you. There are some questions. We're going to try and get one or two. And every question will get an email reply. Just to say what happens from here on in. After this, when you log off, you will each get an email with the full webinar on that you can look at again. We encourage you to share it with your workshop staff, with your drivers, with everybody. And so that will be emailed to you. The questions that we can't answer because of time, we will be sending emails with the answers to each one of the questions. Each presenter will get the question and he will answer it. I just want to say one thing, which is more a comment. And Lawrence Marchant says, Anya, very good brake man. How's it, Lawrence? He said, I did their brake inspection obviously on the Alberton one. The driver went to jail. The owner only paid a fine of 40,000 Rand. No justice. Sure. That was his comment. On that, I'd like to just point out there is in legislation, Section 49 is the duties of an operator. Now, I have sat in conferences and I've actually asked some operators, I've asked the question, who knows what Section 49 is? In one quite prominent conference, there's quite a few operators, not one hand went up. It's the duties of an operator. Basically, keep your vehicle fit for purpose and your driver fit for purpose. Doesn't mean he must be able to run the comrades, but he must be trained. He must know his truck, as Johan was saying there now, and your vehicle must be roadworthy. If you do not comply to Section 49, the MEC has, under Section 50 of the Act, he can suspend the operator's license. He can take you off the road totally. It's never been done. Never been done. And some MECs, I think most, don't even know it exists. So I think it is an injustice. And then from Tabiso, if 764 trucks were tested, how did the trucks get on the road if it did not have brakes? Very good, Tabiso. Very good question there. We refer sometimes to bio-COF. You know, unfortunately in South Africa, corruption is it's invidious. It's everywhere. Politics everywhere. And the COF centers are not immune to corruption. So you can phone and you can buy a COF. All right. And we've come across incidences of this. We actually called in the Hawks on one. And we had a COF center closed down after one particular truck. You might remember that in Cape Town. Yeah. And the other thing is, of course, that is why we do Brake Tyre Watch, is the traffic officials are not well trained on trucks. And we have trained over 3,000 of them. I'm very pleased to say that the other day, that one truck that I showed you earlier on, there was a traffic official on the scene. I went up to him, I said, you got to suspend that thing. And he said, Brake Tyre Watch. It was lovely to see that. He said, I've already got it. He took the licenses out. He had taken the licenses off. So once they need training on the road, because you can't have the type of equipment that is required. There's no brake roller tester. If you want to do proper testing, you've got to get the vehicle to a brake roller tester. They don't have the equipment. So we have been going all out to train as many traffic officials as we can. Unfortunately, COVID has prevented us doing that for 1.5 years now. We're hoping to start up again as soon as it's safe to do so in terms of social distance and COVID protocols, because we have like 80 traffic officers on the road. So I see there, Tabitha, to answer your question, also ignorance of operators. One operator came across, bought a 400,000 for a rig, okay, 2 semi-trailers and a truck tractor. It was in absolutely shoddy condition. He was going to lose his pants, and he did lose his pants. His dream was shattered. So those are those two. I think on the other, Vic has been answering some questions there that's gone on there, but I think Kylie is prompting me now to say we're going to run out of time. Unfortunately, these things have a time limit. But John, I want to thank you for a lovely presentation, a very informative presentation. Webco will be getting this, can share with their clients. I know that some people register and then the time comes and they can't attend. They will get the presentation anyway. And we will also we are starting an online training division in FleetWatch, and this will be on the online training division. So we ask you to share it because it will be in your hands soon. And I don't know, Kylie, have we got any more time for any questions to be answered there? She has indicated that we're running out of time. Any questions the questions will be answered by email. Johan, Kylie's running in. Yeah, she said no, we don't have time.
To get off the screen.
Yeah, she told me. But listen, Jan, thank you. And to all of you delegates who made the time, we certainly hope you found it worthwhile. We're trying our best to add value. All of us, our partners in Brake Tyre Watch, and we've got lots of partners around in different issues, and always willing to help. We're all trying to add value, because I'm going to say something that a lot of people might disagree. But in my 46 years of reporting in this industry, I don't think I've seen standards as low as they are now. And we've got to change that. And we've got to change that. So please share the information here, and let's aim everybody for best practice. And Johan has invited you to phone him, email him, take up the training. Please take it. Suppliers are there to help. And I know he's genuine on that. So God bless you all. Stay safe. Dare I say it, or is someone going to kill me? Get vaccinated, wear a mask, all those things, and fix your brakes. Maintain them, please. God bless you all.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.